Senator from Alaska.
I wish to vacate the quorum call.
Without objection.
I rise today in support of Senate Bill 1925, the Violence Against Women's Act. It's not every day we get to vote on a law that actually saves lives, but this one does. The Senate needs to send the simple and important message that America will not tolerate violence against women, children, and families. We must do our part to reduce domestic violence and sexual assault. It's time for us to step up and make sure this happens now. I look forward to casting my vote for the reauthorization, hopefully very soon. And truly, this legislation, as we continue to move forward, is headed in the right direction. There is bipartisan support, with 61 of us in this chamber signed on as co-sponsors. And it's a lot of good work the bill has done through the Judiciary Committee. All of us have heard from prosecutors, victim service providers, judges, healthcare professionals, and victims themselves. Unfortunately, the fight to protect women and families from violence is far from over. The Violence Against Women's Act was first passed just 18 years ago, and it hasn't been reauthorized since 2006. The law has many differences. We are making progress, and we know a great deal more about domestic violence than when the VAWA was first written. Services for victims have improved. More communities offer safer shelters. Local, state, and federal laws are stronger. Listen to these national statistics. Since the law was first passed in 1994, the number of women killed by an intimate partner has dropped 30%. And annual rates of domestic violence against women have decreased by 2/3. VAWA really does save lives and works. Yet there are still far too many awful stories, inexcusable numbers, especially in my home state. Alaska continues to have some of the worst statistics in the country. 3 out of every 4 Alaskans have or known someone who has experienced domestic or sexual violence. Child sexual assault in Alaska is almost 6 times the national average. 1 out of every 100 adult women in Alaska, nearly 60, have experienced intimate partner violence, sexual violence, or both. The rape rate in Alaska is nearly 2.5 times the national average, and even worse for Alaskan Native women. In Alaska's rural and Native communities, domestic violence and sexual assault is far too common. Our numbers are often far worse than the rest of the country, and clearly we have to continue to do more work in this area. We're insisting that Alaska tribes retain their current authority to issue civil protective orders. And I'm working on a separate bill to expand resources for Alaska tribes in their fight against violence. So you can see why I'm standing here today. We need to do something about this. Not someday, not next year, but truly today. I've been around here for 3 years now, and I'm not shy about having my say in a good political fight. But in this case, on this issue, truly I have no patience. It's hard to believe we even have to debate the law that protects people from abuse and sexual violence. It's truly a piece of legislation we should just move forward and vote on. We need fewer victims, whoever they are, women, kids, white, black, American Indian, Alaskan Native, immigrants, lesbian, and gay people, even men. As a former mayor in a city and a state with higher rate of abuse than the rest of the country, I know this issue. I was responsible for the municipal department that prosecuted domestic violence cases. I was also responsible for the police investigating these cases, and the agencies providing health services to victims and funding to shelters. With the support of the entire community, we pooled our efforts. Using resources from the state and local government and businesses and nonprofits alike, we improved services for victims of child sexual abuse. But intervention and better treatment is not enough. Far from it. Domestic and sexual violence is a public health epidemic. So what we really need is prevention. And this reauthorization effort is just that, the right step in eventually stopping this epidemic. In Alaska, Violence Against Women's Act dollars are used in our biggest cities, in our smallest villages. Funding goes to every corner of the state, the Yamanic Women's Shelter in remote southwest Alaska, to the Aleut community of St. Paul Island in the North Pacific Ocean, to Aware Shelter in urban Juneau, and many others throughout Alaska. We asked the Alaska Network on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault for their stories, examples on how VAWA is helping real families. Here is just one. It's uncomfortable to hear, but it's exactly why we need to act now. A shelter in rural Alaska helped a young woman after she suffered a domestic assault by the father of their 3-year-old child. When she had asked the father for money for food, he choked her and threw her to the ground in front of the child. She reported this was the 3rd such incident of violence, and she could not live there anymore. She spent time in a shelter recovering from her injuries and working to find safe housing in her home village. She also attended DV education groups and received a referral for legal services to assist her with her custody order. Months later, the shelter program received a call from this quiet young woman. She and her child were safe and doing well. She had read all the books recommended to her by the shelter to help her understand the cycle of domestic violence. She was looking for suggestions on more reading material to continue her education on the topic. Now it's hoped that the young woman will become a leader in her community so she can help educate others and work to end domestic violence in Alaska. Madam President, there are stories like this from all over the country, stories of assault and rape and murder. Need we hear more? It's time to reauthorize VAWA. Before I yield the floor, I have one more bit of business. I want to thank the shelter staff, the police, the court system employees, the advocates, and everyone else who works so hard to protect women, children, and families across this country. And to the victims of domestic violence, whoever you are, there is truly hope. We will work with you for you to break the cycle of violence and to bring an end and a change in this area. Thank you, and I yield the floor. And I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.